Hello and welcome back. My name is Greg, and we're going to continue now with part two of our journey through interpretation, hermeneutics, authority, and all that has to do with that arena. And we're going to move now from text, which we talked about in the last 7 episodes, to images. This is crucial today because we very much live in a visual culture. We're surrounded by images, we're bombarded by them. People talk about screen time and all of what that might imply. Video games, of course, are heralded by their amazing graphic imagery, and people adore the sense of immersion that this worldcraft gives us. All of this has to do with our visual acuity and how it can be astonished, but also how it can be manipulated. So we're going to take our sense of human interpretation and human creation of imagery right back to the very beginning here. And we're going to start with the earliest images that we know that our ancestors ever produced. So here we go with dreams, desires, and death. Images precede words by some orders of temporal magnitude. For human beings, the first culture imagery must have been dreams, and this before even the body might have itself been illustrated or adorned, clothed, bound, incised, or altered in some other manner. Dreams are thus as well humanity's original response to nature. Awake, we behold an alien vista, one not of us nor from us, and as well one not given over to us in any but the most insignificant manner. It is from the start culture over against nature, and the most modest origins of the former are yet ranged in a lesser force than are those available to the cosmos. We are as the annual is to the perennial. And even when we overcome a specific species being of mortality as objective and finitudinal being as authentic, nature shall still levy the same ultimatum in front of any form of intelligence that cannot renew itself. Thus, the archetypal image, born of humanity's very existence, is that of the momentary, of the present, rather than of presence, and it is that which imagery, long before words, attempted to mediate and to some extent even overcome. Though recently yet older images have been recovered, it remains the cave paintings at Lascaux which afford us, seemingly eons belated, a glimpse of our own primordial mindset regarding its rendering of the world. Imagination, yes, on the one hand, but at the same time quite recognizable images of both humans and animals, hunting rituals, the herd, the chase, the kill. Animals no longer extant lend cantor to the sheer age involved. Okay, these pictures have pictures of animals that have long been extinct. So that just tells you how old the illustrations and the images are themselves. These are illustrations from a different time and world alike. Indeed, they come across to us as being almost before time itself had taken hold, and long before any historical records had begun. It is astonishing that we recognize anything in these pictures at all, and yet they are quite clear in their representation, if perhaps not necessarily in their intent. And this brings us to the kernel of the hermeneutical puzzle. An author unknown is one thing, but what of one unknowable? A different subspecies does not immediately imply a lower grade of consciousness, let alone being, but even so, we see their resemblances to us not through the fossil record or various phenotypic traits, such as current distributions of eye color, shape of cranium, but rather and precisely through their cultural remains. The most stunning of these must be their paintings, using mineral ochres and vegetable dyes emblazoned upon the miraculously preserved dry flat walls of caverns deep and obscure. Lit by flaming torches or yet by sputtering twigs, surely these images are the result of profound ritual and oblation. This was, of course, the first interpretation of these first images, sympathetic and projective magic to enhance the hunt. In a northern climate where herds were seasonal, success at hunting would have been paramount. This far back, beyond the threshold of even culture memory, the antecedents to the two key European senses of acquisitiveness and desperation combined to seem to utter their original presence, as if they conjured in the mind's voice the unspoken Ursprach of Western consciousness itself. And the source of this aspect of human consciousness, when it comes to providing imagery, which can then be ported into a ritual space and thus onto another plane of existence, is none other than dreams. Such imagery as do dreams allow and allow for do not need any specific interpretation to be recalled and rendered. That we do not see failures represented on the cave walls is certainly telling. It is the artist's hope that the hunt will mean sustenance, while it is the will of the incantatory imagery that it shall indeed do so. Perhaps our ancestral cousins found their dreams both salutary and awry, and made a choice between such outcomes. We are ethnographically well aware that various cultures, unrelated by history or language, use forms of art as sorcery, from songs on the beaches, sung to absent whalers, to Lascaux's imagery, to the percussive throbbing of the adolescent rites of passage. Stravinsky famously borrows this last essence as the profundity of his ballet, The Rite of Spring. And here, the youth's bodies themselves are like the performing imagery of desire, maturation, will, and life and death alike. The mysterious circle of the adolescents, as he calls it, is a direct kindred with the mysterious circles of humans on the cave walls, surrounding nothing, but perhaps imagined as if the hunt would magically place an otherwise elusive animal into their midst. All of this is, inevitably, a strained back-reading of something long forgotten, even to the collective consciousness of shared humanity as a thinking species. But the argument has been made, since one can simply view contemporary works of art that have similar supposed intents, that what lies in the collective unconscious may yet be stirred to life, even if long mute and dormant. We are thus brought once again face to face with dreams and one's own dreaming. Our basic hermeneutic of the image must begin here. It is clear that dream imagery is altered radically by changes external and worldly, and thus our interpretations must act as if they themselves had something of the sacred about them. This puts image within hailing distance of the exegetical. Is Lascaux a sanctuary? Are the paintings akin to scripture? Were then dreams themselves imagined as incantations, always purposed to the doing of something in the world, even if proposed from a space only contiguous with said world? If we shift ourselves bodily from the origins of the dream language to the incipience of its interpretation, we find a symbology already oddly misaligned with our own contemporary reality. The steam locomotive, a death symbol in psychoanalysis, would hardly be considered so threatening today. If a nuclear weapon is too obvious an image for us, and yet also too obscure, these are not, of course, commonplace objects strewn around everyday activities, unlike were trains in their time. Something else has nevertheless replaced the locomotive in our collective imagination. I have myself dreamed of abandoned rail lines, but never actual trains. I have taken the first imagery as suggestive of loss and mourning, since both are, of course, related to death, with the additional sense that death, too, is being mourned. That the switch in major modes of transportation and communication was coming to a close during my childhood suggests in turn that the derelict right-of-way has now a sudden aura of mystery about it. It is a pathway to and into the past. Cast to the margins of automobile byways, the rail line trundles itself off into a more phantasmagorical world, where along we might also witness other shades of its discarded mode of being. Abandoned structures, equipment associated with steam power, spur lines and shunts, levers, cantilevers, ties and rails, all mouldering alongside the trackage, speak to us of a sort of spell which has lost its power. It retains the mood of magic, but with none of its driven sorcery of act and action. To traverse such remaining detritus, once a daily affair, and very much a working one as well, is to enter into a kind of waking dream, as if one were engaged in writing fiction. All but a memory today. As recently as the early 1990s, one could walk the line, as it were, and see carved stone half-mile posts, steam lubrication systems within solid metal chests, water towers and cranes, and all the rest of it. Built to weather the elements, all such culture defies nature in lieu of defying itself. The conception of Godhead outlasts steam power because the latter is an image only, as sleep is unto death. And so the symbolic apparatus associated with death and mourning is propelled forward. Just as the steam era slew that of animal traction, so perhaps shall the quantum epic slay that merely digital. It would be a trick, and perhaps not only that, if we could describe what the dream symbol for death might be a century from now. What takes place in dreams, the action casting itself towards the Traumdeutung, is understandable to the dreamer in situ, as it were. It is always slightly jarring to realize upon awakening that one understood it all and of a piece while still asleep. This comprehension is meaning, but it is equally not yet meaningfulness, to stick to our original distinction. The second can only be gainsaid through waking interpretation, whether this cleaves toward the original psychoanalytic or some other related rubric, such as that Jungian. These models of hermeneutic are not mutually exclusive. One can just as well read a dream of anxiety as a projection as one can expression of an archetype and together. The once hypermodern steam locomotive carries all before it. It is the scythe of modernity. It hauls persons in its comet's tail and to a place over the horizon, unseen. We desire to follow, thereby exercising our thanatic impulse, our will, to death. The train's rapid journey reminds us of our recently accelerated lives, our uncertain but distended lifespan, and the personal and cultural rails upon which we tend to run. A train is derailed, just as is a human being if it strays too far off its tracks. We become more worldly through the driving rain with overpowering steam and speed, and thus one pivotal, we might even say today indeed archetypical image of the Victorian period is that of Turner's 1844 visualization of the Great Western Railway, itself only perhaps half a dozen years in existence at the time of his painting it. Pedantic by our current standards, our exploratory spacecraft Voyager 1, the fastest object yet created by human beings, will at some point be seen as same. Against even solar distances, it plods along with a movement infinitesimal, very much slower in relative terms than even Turner's early locomotives set off round the globe. But Turner the artist knew revolution when he saw it. His image is deliberately impressionistic, a generation before the well-known anti-academic school itself had gotten underway, that is, the Impressionists. We are meant to focus upon the sheer movement and nothing besides. This is an illustration of, once again, the momentary. Not unlike the Lumiere brothers' first film of 1895, the train approaches us. One might be forgiven for stepping out of the way of the painted version, just as was claimed theater patrons ran, some screaming, out of the way of that filmed, a little over half a century later. Could the giant bison and woolly mammoth have been viewed in a similar manner, approaching, threatening, carrying all before them? If our spear fails us, we have no choice but to leap aside their way. The spear augments our waking senses. It is the result of our deliberate action in the world, and thus all hunting instruments or weapons are vehicles for transmuting magic into sorcery. The desire to vanquish the foe with no quarter remains with us. The nuclear missile is that desire, in its very image. It's atomic magic awaiting the genie, who knows when to cast the sorcerer's energy, itself for now only potential. The mammoth bearing down upon us, the locomotive bearing us away with it, the missile raining down and obliterating us at once, are awesome symbols of death imagery, but as well of the proprioceptive inclination sourced in the will to life. To live, I must either escape or defeat the sorcery afoot. Even in the most powerful images, those which express to us the end of the world, along with its attendant humanity, we thus find as well illustrations of what is ongoing. That humanity is annual and nature perennial does not necessarily mean, or yet imply, that the former cannot, using nature as its model, ever renew itself. It is only the living consciousness of itself as ego, in its youthful Narcissus, and then in its elder Tiresias, that lies in conflict with itself. And just as there is no inherent meaning to the image, just as we saw with words, the sheer latitude of interpretive sweep regarding images rather than words impresses us with another kind of potential energy. We can duly imagine that there is as well no inherent conflict between nature and culture, as the one sustains itself upon the basis of the other and expresses its own most being as both counterpoint, but as well counterpart. Images have an immediate advantage over texts. They can represent a dimension more closely aligned and attuned with reality. The image is thus one order more intimate with the pure logos of the other world and its utter lack of interpretation. Once again, it is to dreams which we must hasten, for in the dreamscape do we recover the vestigial remains of both myth and time alike. Thank you for listening, and I hope we'll see you again for part 2.